This is a community-supported legal education channel. Find out how you can support our mission at the links in the description below. Hello everyone, I'm Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. Today, I wanted to talk about a law that has shaped the internet as we know it and gives users the freedom to post content on third-party websites, like when I post this video to YouTube or Floatplane, or when you leave a comment on my video or on my Discord server. It's what lets you write product reviews on Amazon, use social media, advertise on Craigslist, contribute to Wikipedia, rent a room on Airbnb, or even have an online dating profile. This is all thanks to Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. In short, this 1996 law says that a user or provider of an interactive computer service isn't liable for content provided by a third party. This means that, in general, it's the creator of content who's responsible for it, not the website or service provider that hosts it. We'll get into some of the details later, but you can quickly see how we wouldn't be able to have discussion boards, social media, website hosting services, wikis, or even dating apps without these protections. Without liability for third-party content, online service providers are free to host content from anyone and everyone without getting a lawyer to vet it first. This safety is arguably one of the reasons why the US is home to the biggest tech companies in the world. However, this immunity is under attack and increased scrutiny from all corners. President Trump just signed an executive order to have agencies review Section 230 in what looks like punishment for companies that moderate or censor conservative voices. On Friday, he even tweeted to repeal Section 230 altogether. But this outrage isn't new. A few years ago, Senator Ted Cruz argued that there was anti-conservative bias in companies like Facebook and Twitter, and that Section 230 enabled this. He proposed possibly amending Section 230 to create liability for platforms that weren't even-handed in how they moderated content. Liberals, on the other hand, seem to be disturbed by the lack of moderation on social media that enables online harassment, fake news stories, and recruitment for hate groups or enemies of the state, with some arguing that Section 230 gives social media companies a free pass to not moderate or fact-check their content. To complicate things, you may have also heard that moderation turns social media companies into publishers rather than hands-off platforms that passively display content. The argument is that publishers aren't entitled to Section 230 immunity because moderation, especially with a particular viewpoint in mind, removes immunity. Some of these perspectives have a kernel of truth to them, but they all misconstrue the purpose and reasoning behind Section 230 and underestimate how pivotal it's been to shaping the internet. Worse, mainstream media frequently misrepresent what the law says and means. This makes it hard for the average person to understand what the heck the law is, how it came to be, and why we need to carefully consider the ramifications of changing it. So we're going to cut through all the misinformation and look at what the law says, how we got it, and how it affects your freedom of speech. We'll address the downsides too, and everyone should walk away with a better understanding of what's really at stake. Let's start with the broader legal framework. The Communications Decency Act, or CDA, was passed in 1996 with the purpose of encouraging internet service providers to, and I kid you not, get adult content off the internet. In fact, Senator Dixon, the Democratic drafter of the bill, had a friend print explicit images found online and put them into a binder so Dixon could enthusiastically show his colleagues exactly what was out there. Basically, he didn't want this technology to corrupt or traumatize children, especially as the internet was being introduced into schools more and more. The CDA made it a crime to have indecent or offensive material online in a place where minors could access it. It meant adult materials had to be behind a paywall that required age verification. In short, the government wanted internet companies to police and moderate content to make it more family-friendly. Remember, the internet was a very different place in the early 90s. Internet service providers were much more active in curating content in order to entice people to subscribe. AOL. But there was a problem. There were 2 internet defamation cases that made it clear that internet service providers shouldn't moderate or curate content. Cubby v. CompuServe, a 1991 case, held that CompuServe, an internet service provider, wasn't responsible for defamatory posts of its users because CompuServe had no way of knowing what the users were writing. A lack of knowledge created a lack of liability. Then, in 1995, we have a similar case, but with a different outcome, in Stratton Oakmont v. Prodigy Services. Prodigy was an ISP that marketed itself as more family-friendly and actively moderated and curated their bulletin boards and content. This moderation made them, from a legal perspective, aware of a defamatory post in their Money Talks bulletin board that accused the business of Stratton Oakmont of fraud and misleading investors. The court ultimately found that since Prodigy was aware of the content, they counted as the speaker or publisher and were therefore liable. So what did this mean for the Communications Decency Act? It meant that internet companies were incentivized to be blind to content, to avoid creating liability for hosting things like defamation. This is the opposite of the goal of the CDA, which was self-policing and moderation. The solution came from two representatives, Chris Cox, a Republican, and Ron Wyden, a Democrat. They disliked what they saw as a bitterly divided House and believed in working together across the aisle to develop solutions to problems that balanced considerations central to both parties. Together, Cox and Wyden searched for things that were new, where political lines weren't already firmly drawn, so that they could propose a balance going forward. I'm going to read from Section 230 now, and I want you to listen for that balance. Quote, "It is the policy of the United States to 1. Promote the continued development of the Internet and other interactive computer services and other interactive media. 2. To preserve the vibrant and competitive free market that presently exists for the Internet and other interactive computer services unfettered by federal or state regulation. 3. To encourage the development of technologies which maximize user control over what information is received by individuals, families, and schools who use the Internet and other interactive computer services. 4. To remove disincentives for the development of and utilization of blocking and filtering technologies that empower parents to restrict their children's access to objectionable or inappropriate material. And 5, to ensure vigorous enforcement of federal laws to deter and punish trafficking in obscenity, stalking, and harassment by means of the computer." You can hear how they want to encourage businesses to develop solutions but still create family-friendly spaces online. They struck this balance by removing liability from online interactive services for content that is generated by third parties. What's next is the heart of Section 230. Quote, "Protection for Good Samaritan blocking and screening of offensive material. 1. Treatment of publisher or speaker. No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. Civil liability. 2. No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be liable on account of A, any action voluntarily taken in good faith to restrict access to or availability of material that the provider or user considers to be objectionable, whether or not such material is constitutionally protected, or B, any action to enable or make available to information content providers or others the technical means to restrict access to material described in paragraph 1. So what does this mean? It means that the information content provider, the original creator of the content, is responsible for it, not the online service provider that hosts it, even if the service provider is aware of the content through moderation. Twitter isn't responsible for your tweets, that dating app isn't responsible if you lie on your profile, and Amazon isn't responsible if you write a fake review. This also means there's no simple legal distinction between a platform and a publisher. Under the law, publishers can take advantage of this immunity too. If you're a blogger and give readers the chance to comment on your articles, you're only responsible for the article, not the comments. If I live stream on YouTube and a viewer writes something defamatory in chat, neither YouTube nor I am legally liable for it. There are no provisions that a service provider needs to be unbiased, effective, or otherwise good at moderating. If you don't like how one service provider moderates, you can switch to a competitor. Service providers can moderate content to create the type of service that they want. They're explicitly allowed to remove speech otherwise protected by the First Amendment. The only reason they need is a good faith attempt to remove objectionable content. And let's face it, the standard for objectionable is very subjective, and almost anything can be offensive to someone somewhere. But that's how the bill was drafted, to provide broad protections to online service providers for third-party generated content. I'll talk about the impact of this law on the First Amendment shortly, but first I wanted to explain the two exceptions to Section 230 immunity. The first is that Section 230 does not apply to intellectual property. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act has its own set of safe harbor provisions for that. This is how we got a moderation liability case when LiveJournal started curating unauthorized copyrighted content on its website. Because the content host, LiveJournal, touched the content, they should have known to check for copyright, so they were held liable for the user content they later curated. The second exception is for federal crimes. Websites can still be held criminally responsible for conduct that violates federal laws, although it gets somewhat tricky because most crimes require a mens rea, or a knowing or willful element, also called intent. In practice, these laws only get applied when the primary function of the website is to do something illegal, and the operators resist warnings and don't cooperate with FBI investigations. For example, several years ago, the website Backpage was taken down by the FBI for facilitating commerce in people. In that case, most of the hosted ads and revenue generated were related to adults. The website had staff actively screen every ad for appropriateness and either edited the ad or coached the poster on how to make the ad conform to Backpage standards. After investigation, the FBI discovered that when inappropriate or underage ads were submitted, the website just deleted the inappropriate or underage part and then posted it anyway. Although moderation is protected under Section 230, the owners of the website were ultimately responsible for the criminal conduct they facilitated, pleading guilty to money laundering and conspiracy to facilitate, turning over the Backpage.com website, and cooperating with authorities. Now, there are some important criticisms of the CDA and Section 230 when it comes to freedom of speech. In fact, the part of the CDA that was geared towards getting adult material behind paywalls was almost immediately found unconstitutional for restricting communication between consenting adults. However, free speech advocates wanted Section 230 left untouched. So why would those who value free speech want websites to have immunity from civil liability if they moderated content? Well, the Electronic Frontier Foundation was at the front lines fighting against the CDA. Let's look at what they have to say about Section 230. Quote, CDA 230 protects web services and social networks such as Facebook, Twitter, and blogs from being held legally responsible for hosting or facilitating online speech. Without it, service providers would become targets for individuals, governments, and corporations who want to limit free expression. Under CDA 230, service providers are categorically protected against most legal claims based on what their users say and do, which means they can't be forced to censor user content. Basically, if Yelp could be liable for defamation for any user reviews, then they likely just wouldn't offer that service. They could choose not to moderate, but that meant that if any company claimed that a review was defamatory, Yelp would legally be on notice and risk liability if they left it up. Companies could falsely claim defamation against reviews they didn't like, and Yelp or other service providers would have to take them down. No more online reviews, comments on news articles, social media, YouTube, Floatplane, Twitch, Reddit, Imgur, or even third-party ad services. It would turn the internet into the same power dynamic as television, film, and print media. Content would be produced by a few people with money or power that are able to distribute what they want. A few people speak, but millions of people are encouraged to listen. There's an inherent imbalance here. There's a high price of entry to be someone who can be heard by a million people. Section 230 changes this. You don't need to be a millionaire to produce content and have it seen. And it's not a coincidence that lots of grassroots movements have flourished on the internet. Videos filmed by amateurs witnessing events can go viral and hold those in power accountable. Unpopular, stigmatized, and marginalized people have safe places to come together and support each other. Whether their messages are popular or good for brand management doesn't matter. Service providers can create spaces for users to speak, and that helps give power to the voices of those on the margins. However, Section 230 doesn't create a perfect free speech utopia, nor was it meant to. Service providers are free to moderate their content and create the type of space they want. They're allowed to host your content without liability, but they aren't required to. In fact, forcing them to host content they don't want is likely a violation of the company's free speech rights. In general, constitutional rights are between the government and its citizens, not between a private corporation and you. Service providers can remove anything their terms of service allow for, including constitutionally protected speech. Ideally, if one company doesn't provide for the needs of a segment of users, another company can establish itself as a competitor. We've seen this to an extent with Twitter and Gab. However, there's nothing stopping social media giants from all having similar terms of service and moderating in similar ways. This can mean that some voices are broadly excluded from the most popular websites with no redress. We, as users, think we have access to a multitude of voices, but some people are silenced a lot more than others. By systematically targeting certain voices, the service provider can paint a different image of the world, which changes how we see events and each other. And feeling excluded or targeted sucks. Conservatives may feel there's no service providers looking out for them. Meanwhile, other marginalized groups might feel no service provider prevents harassment or abuse, making it much more stressful to even exist on social media. The president has even proposed repealing Section 230 or amending it to remove protections when service providers are biased in their moderation. However, getting rid of Section 230 immunity wouldn't increase free speech. It would probably decrease how visible your content is. If companies faced liability for user speech, it would be too expensive and risky to host it. And it's not just big social media companies that would need to make this decision. If you had a blog and weren't allowed to moderate comments, you might be stuck letting violent or offensive imagery into your comment section. You wouldn't have control over what visitors to your site saw, which can make it less palatable for advertisers. Why allow a comment section at all if all it would do is increase your risk? The internet would get a whole lot less interactive. This doesn't even address that it'd be nearly impossible to determine what biased moderation even means or who gets to decide what's biased. Biased according to who? The service provider? The government? A court? A team of lawyers? What's biased to you may look fair to me. And let's think about this for a moment. Do we really want a fully unmoderated internet? There's a lot of stuff out there that's constitutionally protected speech, but it doesn't mean I want to see it. Without Section 230, the internet would start to look a lot like your local television station. Big media companies would still be deciding what's available, but there wouldn't be a chance for it to be your content. So when you see someone say that Section 230 needs to be repealed or amended, take a moment to consider the tremendous impact that would have on the landscape of the internet and the U.S. economy. The immunity provided by Section 230 means that the biggest tech companies in the world are located in the U.S. For example, the EFF says, the legal protections provided by CDA 230 are unique to U.S. law. European nations, Canada, Japan, and the vast majority of other countries do not have similar statutes on the books. While these countries have high levels of internet access, most prominent online services are based in the United States. This is in part because CDA 230 makes the U.S. a safe haven for websites that want to provide a platform for controversial or political speech and a legal environment favorable to free expression. There is a very similar argument made by Jeff Kosseff, a journalist, cybersecurity law professor at the United States Naval Academy and author of the book, The 26 Words That Created the Internet, based on the history and case law of CDA 230. This book explains everything you need to know about Section 230 in an entertaining and accessible way, and you can get a free copy from audible.com when you activate a free trial membership. By using the link in the description below, you help support our channel. Now, just because Section 230 is fundamental to how online services work, it doesn't mean it can never be amended. It just means any changes have to be carefully considered to prevent unintended and expensive consequences. Hopefully, now everyone understands a little bit more about what Section 230 says, why we have it, that moderation doesn't remove Section 230 immunity, and why it's helped create spaces that give voices to those typically without a voice. I understand complaints about how social media companies moderate or monetize their content. Heck, I've complained that our videos that don't violate community guidelines standards still get demonetized, and how unclear and inconsistently YouTube labels and treats our videos. Still, I would rather be able to have a YouTube channel than to get rid of YouTube entirely. I support other companies like Floatplane, stepping up and offering a better experience for creators and viewers. So, what do you think of Section 230? Did you learn anything new? Do you think it should be repealed or amended? Let us know what you think in the comments below, although keep in mind the only reason I can say that is because I'm not liable for your comments. And that's our show. Thank you for joining me. I'm Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney, and this is Lawful Masses, your favorite legal news and education channel. We would not exist without your financial support on patreon.com/ljfrench, sponsors.com/law, YouTube memberships, and Floatplane. Thank you to the following June supporters at the $50 plus level: Joe Tyson, Wes Delj, Citizen of the Sovereign, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Eevi, Kyle Mudrak, Spirit Bear, Jan Negrey, Michael Pearce, Daniel Perez, Blackleaf, Benjamin Hitov, Stephen, Ottah, Cute Grills in Your Area, Longreach Jones, Definitely Not Prenda Law, Ugly Grill, Shielo T, Josh Baker, Gregory, Rudolph Bescherer Jr., Kristian Hellman, Jay Dixon, Ameknight, and Oscar the Phrophet. And thank you to the $5 plus supporters who are scrolling on the screen in front of me and on the LED panel here in the studio. I hope everyone is having a safe and healthy start to the summer. I will see you in the videos that drop. I love you all. Bye.
Ball didn't pop out, and his ears went back. Like, are you messing with me?
Yeah, I'm gonna take the hose. There's a couple of flat areas.